Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Suplex Report. Get ready for all things WWE, news, match analysis, and more. Hit that bell so you never miss the action. In the unpredictable world of professional wrestling, emotions often blur the line between reality and showmanship. But every once in a while, a story emerges that feels raw, real, and deeply human. That's exactly what happened when Jacob Fatu, a man known for his power, passion, and loyalty, found himself betrayed by someone he once called a brother. What began as a shocking act of treachery soon spiraled into one of wrestling's most intense personal rivalries. This isn't just the story of revenge, it's the story of redemption, respect, and the moment that reminded fans why they fell in love with wrestling. The betrayal that changed everything. The wrestling world thrives on loyalty, brotherhood, and respect, but when those values are broken, the fallout can be earth-shattering. For Jacob Fatu, one of the most intense and respected competitors in the industry, that truth became painfully real. The tension between him and his former ally had been brewing for months, a slow-burning fire waiting for its inevitable explosion. It all began 3 months earlier during one of the biggest matches of Fatu's career, a moment that was supposed to elevate him to championship glory. Instead, betrayal struck when he least expected it. His closest friend, someone he trusted like a brother, turned on him in front of millions. The betrayal wasn't just a cheap attack, it was calculated and cruel, meant to humiliate Fatu when he was at his most vulnerable. The image of that moment, his former friend standing over him with a smirk, was burned into fans' memories. For Fatu, that image became fuel. Every interview, every appearance, every match after that moment carried a quiet intensity. You could see it in his eyes, the heartbreak, the anger, and the resolve to make things right. What started as a storyline soon became something more personal. The locker room split between those who sympathized with Fatu and those who claimed business is business. But for Jacob Fatu, this wasn't about business. This was about betrayal, pride, and redemption. The fire that wouldn't die. As weeks passed, the tension between Fatu and his former ally only grew stronger. Fans could feel the storm coming. Fatu's interviews became shorter, his demeanor colder. Whenever his betrayer appeared on screen, Fatu would watch from backstage, his fists clenched, jaw tight. Behind the scenes, people whispered that it was only a matter of time before something snapped. His rival had started to flaunt his betrayal, posting mocking videos, making subtle jabs during promos, and acting as if his actions were justified. Every word stung, every smirk added more pressure to the boiling pot. But Fatu didn't rush into revenge. Instead, he waited, patiently, silently. He understood that the perfect moment would come, and when it did, he'd make sure it wasn't just another segment for the cameras. He wanted it to mean something, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. This was no longer just about winning a match, it was about restoring respect. And when opportunity finally presented itself, Fatu was ready. The confrontation that shook the locker room. It happened on a quiet Tuesday night, during a live event that no one expected would turn into one of the most talked about nights in recent wrestling memory. The arena was buzzing with excitement for the scheduled matches, but behind the scenes, something else was brewing. Jacob Fatu had been planning his moment carefully. He knew where his former ally would arrive, when he'd walk into the building, and exactly how he'd make his presence known. Witnesses later said that Fatu's focus that night was unlike anything they'd ever seen, calm but intense, like a storm about to break. When the two finally crossed paths, the air was electric. There were no cameras, no scripts, just raw emotion. Words were exchanged, but this wasn't about insults, it was about accountability. Fatu demanded an explanation, and for a moment it seemed like they might find a way to settle things peacefully. But when his rival brushed him off with arrogance and mockery, Fatu's patience finally shattered. What followed wasn't chaos, it was catharsis. There was no wild brawl or reckless violence, just a man standing up for his dignity in the face of someone who had taken it away. People nearby stepped in quickly, separating them before things escalated. Yet the message had already been sent. Jacob Fatu was done being silent. The aftermath that split the industry word of the confrontation spread like wildfire. Social media exploded within hours, with fans and insiders sharing their takes on what had happened. Some praised Fatu for finally confronting the person who had wronged him, calling it one of the most emotional moments in recent wrestling history. Others criticized how personal things had become, arguing that the business side of wrestling had crossed into something uncomfortably real. Regardless of opinion, one thing was clear. This was no ordinary rivalry anymore. It had transcended the boundaries of scripted entertainment. The promotion's management was faced with a challenge: how to handle something so charged with genuine emotion while maintaining professionalism. Both men were given time away from television to cool tensions and reflect. During that time, fans debated endlessly: was Fatu justified in confronting his betrayer, or had his emotions taken him too far? Podcasts, interviews, and wrestling forums couldn't get enough of the story. For better or worse, Fatu had reignited a spark in fans who craved authenticity in their wrestling stories. His pain, his anger, and his redemption felt real, and that made all the difference. The return of redemption. 3 weeks later, Jacob Fatu made his return to television, and the reaction was nothing short of thunderous. As his entrance music hit, the arena erupted in chants of his name. The cheers were so loud that he had to pause in the middle of the ramp, taking in the moment. When he stepped into the ring, there was no flashy speech or dramatic entrance, just honesty. With a microphone in hand, he spoke from the heart. He admitted that the past few months had tested him more than any match ever could. He acknowledged his mistakes but made it clear that standing up for respect was something he'd never regret. "I lost a brother," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "but I found myself again." The crowd roared in approval. His message wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption, growth, and learning that strength doesn't always come from winning titles, but from facing betrayal with courage. That night, Jacob Fatu reminded everyone that wrestling isn't just about athleticism, it's about humanity. The final showdown. The stage was set for one last chapter between the two men whose story had gripped the wrestling world. The promotion announced a match that would decide their fate once and for all, with one stipulation: the loser would have to leave the company for good. The build-up was electric. Every promo, every stare-down, every moment leading to the match felt like the culmination of months of emotion. When the bell rang, the energy in the arena was unlike anything seen in years. Both men gave everything they had. Every move carried history. Every counter carried pain. The crowd alternated between silence and thunderous cheers, completely captivated by what they were witnessing. This wasn't just another wrestling match. It was a story of betrayal, forgiveness, and closure. In the end, Jacob Fatu stood tall, his hand raised in victory. There was no celebration, no gloating, just relief. His opponent lay in the ring, beaten not by strength alone, but by conviction. The audience gave Fatu a standing ovation, not just for winning, but for surviving one of the most emotional journeys in recent wrestling history. The lesson that lived beyond the ring. Looking back, what happened between Jacob Fatu and his former ally became more than just a headline or storyline. It became a reminder of why fans love professional wrestling in the first place. Behind the theatrics and rivalries are real people with real emotions. Fatu's story showed that respect and loyalty are worth fighting for, even when the cost is high. His confrontation wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming dignity and standing up for what he believed in. The aftermath brought lessons that extended far beyond the ring: that betrayal hurts deeply, that forgiveness doesn't come easily, and that true redemption comes from facing your pain head-on. When Fatu spoke later in interviews, he reflected with maturity, saying, "Sometimes you have to go through fire to find who you really are." Fans still talk about that moment because it wasn't just entertainment, it was real. It reminded everyone that wrestling, at its best, mirrors life itself, full of passion, heartbreak, and triumph. And Jacob Fatu's story will forever stand as proof that in a world built on showmanship, authenticity still reigns supreme. The legacy of loyalty and respect. Today, the name Jacob Fatu carries a deeper meaning. He's not just seen as a powerhouse performer, but as a man who lived through betrayal and came out stronger. His journey reignited conversations about integrity in wrestling and inspired younger stars to value loyalty above fame. Fans remember the fire in his eyes, the conviction in his words, and the grace with which he handled his comeback. His rivalry may have ended, but the message it left behind continues to echo. In the squared circle and beyond, respect is everything. No championship, no spotlight, and no storyline can replace the bond of trust between competitors. Jacob Fatu reminded the world that even in the chaos of professional wrestling, honor still